It's my great pleasure this evening to welcome Captain Alison Miller, who was in the RWS during the Rhodesian War. And Alison, thank you very much for giving us your valuable time. It's freezing cold here in Cape Town, a nice summery day there in the UK. So please forgive me for looking like a polar bear. But Alison, we'd love to hear your story about your time in Rhodesia. So without further ado, over to you.
I think it's worth telling you how I got there in the first place, because I was British born and bred, and I trained as a nurse in London, and I wanted to have 1 year away from London before I went back to nursing in the UK. And I had friends out in Rhodesia. And at that stage, they had something called the Sunshine Scheme, where the hospital took your flight out. You had to work for a year as a nurse, and then they paid your flight back. But I loved Rhodesia a lot, and so I didn't want to go back. But I didn't really like the nursing. It wasn't busy enough. I was used to a very busy London hospital, and it just wasn't busy. And I wasn't bored, but I wasn't really stimulated. But I wanted to stay in Rhodesia. And at that time, at the right time, they started to want to have women in the army. They had no women at all in the army before I went. I was the third course of course, so I couldn't go in as a nurse. So they gave me rank structure depending on your school qualifications. And I had A levels, so I was colour sergeant. That was the highest rank we were given, was colour sergeant. So it went from private to colour sergeant based on your school qualifications. So I joined. I was actually at that stage. I'd gone from Andrew Fleming to Umtali Hospital, so I actually joined in Umtali, and I was posted to 4RR. And Garth Barrett, who then was OCSAS, he was at that time the boss at 4RR. But I was there for probably about 3 to 6 months, and ironically, my nursing was brought into use almost as much, because there were quite a lot of things going on and people getting injured. So I was able to use my nursing despite the fact I wasn't in the nursing course. So that was quite interesting. And that's where I met Pat Armstrong for the first time. He'll come up again later. Also the Far Force, one of the Far Force groups when I was there, KCAR commander when I was there. And that's the first time I met him. And then they decided it was time that they needed to have some officers in the RWS to make the structure more sound. The interesting is that when I was a colour sergeant, they put me in the officers' mess and not the sergeant's mess, which is a very strange thing to do. I think they didn't quite know how to treat the woman. You know, the officers kept opening the doors for us and treat us like women, which is lovely, but it's not exactly quite what soldiers are supposed to do. And so they went. People weren't very happy. Some of the officers weren't very happy about us being in there. I don't think I got the feeling. They were very kind, but you just got the feeling that I was the only female at Grand Reef, so they didn't really quite know how to treat me. So it was a really, really interesting time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But then they decided that they needed more structure. So they had an officer selection board, and I was the first group to be invited, if you like, to go on the selection board. I don't know how many. I'm trying to think how many. There are probably about 20, 30 of us on the board. I forget the figures, but I think 12 of us actually got selected and went on to the officers' course. So it was a very, very interesting time. The first group of females on an officers' course was officers who didn't quite know how to teach us, if that makes sense. And the RSM, I think it was Springer, who was the RSM of RLI, he was there. And they were fantastic, but they kept treating us as a woman. And they found difficult in things like drills and telling us off and shouting at us. They were probably a little bit too kind, but it was it must have been I'm not very good. So I think it was 8 or 12-week course, and we got accommodated on a building at the side of the officers' mess at KG6 barracks. So we did that course, and then the interesting thing is where Pat Armstrong comes back into it again is that I did reasonably well on the course, and I was given the job of GSO3 SD Army Headquarters, which was a fantastic job to have. But Pat Armstrong, who's GSO2 SD, said no, he wasn't going to have me. We had met at the didn't really click at Grand Reef, I don't think, and he didn't want me, and he was virtually forced to have me. And poor Freddie Watts, who was GSO3 SD, was moved out, and I think he was sent back to the bush. So I'm not quite sure what his family thought about that. But Pat had no choice, and Pat doesn't like not having choices. I'm going to be kind about him. I went into his office the first morning. He said, "I don't want you here. I don't think you will manage the job here, and I don't think you're just not right for this job." And then he looked at me and said, "But I've got the feeling you'll prove me wrong."
Okay.
And that's where it started from then on. And really, we had a very socially, we didn't really socialise, but working relationship, very good indeed. And one of the main things I remember of the whole time I was there was we had a really difficult time once trying to work out, because of sanctions, trying to work out how to allocate some of the equipment, weapons and stuff to various of the units. And we just, neither of them, Pat's a bright guy, I mean, he really is a bright guy, very, very astute. And neither he or I could work out how we were going to do it. And I went home and went to bed, woke up about 4 a.m, saw it all in one. That's what we did. It was amazing. It was completely, I don't know how it happened completely out of the blue. That was a fantastic time. It just sort of suddenly it was there and we got everything right. And I think that sort of sealed how well we worked together probably. So that was my time in Army headquarters, and trying to think what else.
Can I just ask a question while you're thinking about that? What is GSO3 stand for?
General Staff Officer, Staff Tutors.
Okay, right.
You've got GSO3 training, who's training, and SD is. It's things like it's not. It's the allocation of resources. To a point, I'm sure Pat will disagree with me, but from what I remember, my memory of day-to-day things is not that good, but that's sort of what I remember. And I worked with him there for the next 2-3 years. And I said my time was not very good. I was in the Army altogether for 6.5 years. I worked with him for 2 or 3 years, and then he was posted to Selous Scouts. Pat Armstrong invited me to go to the Scouts. So I went out to the Selous Scouts for only the last 3 months of the war. I went out as the internal IO. So there's a chap responsible for intelligence for operations external, and I was the internal IO. And I remember at the end, it was really looking at what was going on at the. Do you remember at the end of the war when the elections were going? They had the terrorists were put together in various groups, I think 8 or 10 assembly points around the country. Yes. Do you remember that or not? And they had a British major and a British sergeant major in charge of each one. And my job was sort of well, in some ways, find out what was going on there, if you like. So a lot happened. A lot I've missed out has happened in between from the beginning to the end. One of them, which everybody in the Army will know, is when I just got his name, so I'm going to have a look at his name because I had to write. It was the helicopter crash. I don't know if you were around then. I'm just going to get my notes. Sorry. It was General Shaw. When General Shaw was killed in the helicopter, I was still at 4R then. I wasn't an officer, and I was for in Opsom or something in them, and it wasn't Garth Barrett and those days, he'd gone by then. It was, I can't remember who the boss was then, but we'd heard a helicopter gone down, and we were the closest. So and I was as a nurse, I said, well, can you come please? So 4 of us went in a Land Rover to the helicopter site, and there was General Shaw, Colonel Park, all those were dead. The pilot survived, and the pilot, I think the tech lost his leg or what. I was certainly one of the South African pilots, and he survived, but the others died. But that was for me. That didn't, people weren't how important they were. But there's no doubt General Shaw would have been in charge of the army had he survived. And I think Colonel Parker would do. He was a 2IC to Derry McIntyre. Derry missed the trip. He got there too late. So Tom Parker had to go in his place. And he was 2IC of the brigade, and he died as well. I think he would have been brigade commander after Derry McIntyre probably had he survived. It was a big impact. The people that were the seniors in the army, it was a huge impact to the army then.
Wasn't?
But that was something that I remember.
Wasn't that Lieutenant Colonel Dave Parker, DG Parker?
No, Tom, was it? No, he was higher rank, wasn't it? He was a full colonel because he was two. Wasn't he two? I'm sure he was brigade second in command, but I could be wrong. Your memory might be better than mine, but it was certainly. I thought it was.
The OC,
it could be Dave Parker. Yeah, could be. Yeah.
The RLI was killed in a helicopter crash when
then perhaps it was
into a cable that was strung.
Yeah, that's right. Cable. Yeah, the cable that carried grain across the valley, and they were going to visit the troops at Christmas, and the pilot said to me at the hospital, I took him back to the hospital, he said, they told me to go down, he kept saying, and I think they went down and the rotors hit the cable. It was Parker. Perhaps he was a lieutenant colonel, yes, but it was him, yes.
Yeah, he was. His nickname was the King. He was a commanding officer of the RLI.
Yes, apparently it was fantastic. I mean,
apparently that.
I mean, and the other thing was,
that cable was on the old maps. That cable actually was.
Oh, was it? I don't know. Oh, we could see it.
But the pilots had received new maps, and on the new maps that cable wasn't, and so consequently they didn't know. Yeah, know it was there, and they flew right into it. Yeah,
I mean, I did note when you looked at the cable, it was difficult to see because it was green.
Ah, okay.
The halfway across, so you even looking for it, you had to look. So I'm not surprised they missed it. I'm not surprised at all. But it was really, I mean, it was only when I got back, because I escorted the bodies back to the mortuary and then took the pilot to the hospital, and it was only really a lot later, probably a year or so, that I really understood what a huge shock that was for the army. I'd only been in for. I joined in October, and this was December. I'd only been in 2 months, and I was very junior then. So, it didn't mean. But the other thing that was the other time that I had a thing much later, when the third group they had 3 lots of female officers courses, and the third lot I was allocated to go to join me for the job I was doing. I'm still GS3SD then, and we did a trip around the country to the different brigades, and we got to Fort Vic, and we were staying at the Fort Vic Hotel, and that was mortared by terrorists when we were there, and I remember I was in Selous, and I was in a bright yellow trouser suit, which isn't the best thing when you're trying to hide in the bush, but I didn't know. Somebody got me and said, you need to come. And I went round, and there was Andre Dennison, who was the Major Andre Dennison. He was shot, in fact, not by the terrorists. He was shot by one of the police guys behind. They were in a sort of grouped round, going through to track the terrorists, and the bloke at the back, a police guy, heard something and fired forward and shot Andre Dennison, and he was killed. So it was he was alive when can I swear? I probably can't swear on this thing, but he was alive when I got there. F this, he said, and then he died. So it was he was shot in the back of the chest or through the chest or something. And then so that was hard, because the girl I was with, we were all pretty scared. I mean, I was scared. I hadn't been mortared before, it was the whole thing was obviously him dying was terrible, but it was horrid. But to show how life goes, I was 30 years later. I was in the because I was an intensive care sister. I went back to nursing in the UK, and I was in my own unit coffee room when the doctors were chatting. He came up and he said, "Did you say Andre Dennison?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That was my father's best friend in the British Army." Would you believe? What a coincidence! Yeah, they were majors or captains together. And then Andre went out from the British Army to the Rhodesian Army. But apparently he was also a good guy. I mean, I'd met him before a couple of times, but didn't really know him properly. But
he was in the RAR, right?
RAR, yes, it was RAR, yes, yeah. Do you know what a fuffy slide is? Fuffy slide.
Of course, yeah.
I used to, if I had weekends off, I used to go and join the guys. Sounds bad now, doesn't it? I used to go and join the guys in the bush, in the basic, in the camp, in the 4 little platoons. So I used to go and join them in the bush, because I was always on the radio to them, so we could then meet them face to face. And we were going down the fuffy slide into this lake, just having fun. And suddenly there was a contact came up, so everybody was rushing off to this contact. And they followed some tracks across. I think 2 of our guys had been shot at the day before. I don't think they were killed, but they'd been shot at and injured the same terrorists, and they trapped and caught them. And when I got there, our guys were about to slot the. Oh, you can take out what you're not supposed to. They were going to slot this guy, and I said, no, we need this guy. You must, either let me do my job, or I'll walk away, because there's no, I'm not going to, the soldiers were, you can imagine what it's like when their mates were injured and they got the guy who had injured him. But I said, just either let me get my job or I'll walk away, because that was the right thing to do. But they let me carry. The rifle had been shot. The spring from the magazine from the AK had gone into his knee, and sort of spiraled into his knee. There wasn't a lot I could do. I mean, there wasn't a lot to do, but they took him back. But the interesting is that about 2 or 3 months later, perhaps less than that, they had a don't know what you call it. The psyops had a thing where they took terrorists to army sections in the bush or army groups to answer questions to find out how our army. And I was in the back of a truck with a couple of the terrorists that were being taken there and some other people. And there was this guy with one leg. He'd had his leg amputated above the knee. And he turned to me. I didn't recognize him. He turned to me and said, "I want to thank you so much for what you did for me that day." Amazing, isn't it? And that was the guy. But this you might have to cut. I found that he was hung a month later. He was hung about to be cut out. But it's interesting how things, I don't know. I just had very, very interesting, that one. Very interesting. There was another one where, after independence, the terrorists, I think they were trying to work out what to do with everybody. I was still, I've got a feeling I might have been GSO2SD short term, very, very short term. I can't remember, but I went around to there were 10 battalions being trained by the British Army, a British major, sergeant, etc., or sergeant major. And I went out to work out their order of battle. And we went somewhere up north, I can't remember where. And on the way back, I was with a British major because he was with us and he was going from Army headquarters with me in a normal car. And on the way back, people were being fired on the other side of the road, and some terrorists who had been drinking a lot. They'd just been paid, been drinking a lot, so very drunk, and they were fine as we went on. So they started to fire at us, and the Brit guy wants to stop the car, and I said, "For heaven's sake, just drive," So we got back to. He just wanted to stop everything. If he thought he was going to talk to them, and that's right, because I had a ex-terrorist as my boss. He became the GSO2SD, and I was GSO3SD. And and we hadn't let him go. He wanted to come, and we said no. But so that was an interesting story. And when I got back, I hadn't realised that it had quite a big effect on the British Army who were there, because if one of their own majors had been killed, that would have been a bit of a problem. But he was okay. I think we were both a little bit shaken up. That's a tiny bit, but it was okay. I stayed on after independence, and I was obviously left GSO2, left Scouts obviously on the day of independence. I then went. Something I do remember at the Scouts is that on the day of the vote and everything, the result, I was in the office with Pat Armstrong, and I can't remember who else. There was 3 or 4 of us in there, and nobody expected that result. Pat was completely shocked. It's interesting. They really genuinely did not believe that result. Pat stayed in. I don't know what Pat did. I can't remember, because he hadn't been married to Mary Walls by then, so I'm not quite sure what job he did after that. But I was back at Army headquarters. Anyway, I stayed a year afterwards. I left February, the year after independence. I decided in my mind that I would leave at the time the 2 people I respected most who were still around were leaving. One was Derry McIntyre and one was Pat Armstrong. Is it worth me going down south? And sensibly he said no. I was a bit sad, but sensibly he said no, I'd go back to UK. And because the British Army, because the British Army guys, the training team was there was, and I don't know, have you seen Pat Lawless's YouTube? Yeah. Well, in there he talks about Rupert Smith a lot. Rupert Smith in the British Army. Well, Rupert Smith was out there, and he sorted out my transfer to the British Army. Fantastic guy, very, very, very impressive guy. And again, in the ITU in the coffee room on another day, was sitting one of the female doctors, and it's his niece. Rupert Smith's niece. I mean, it's such a small world, isn't it? It's amazing. But I came back to UK, and then for one, there was only Pat Lawless, myself, and Graham Murdoch were the 3 that came back to UK as officers. We were transferred direct to the British Army. We met in Bunda when Pat Lawless. So we were all in Germany at one stage. So we all met together, just once, all met together. See at least every year, because we have a reunion in London every year. I hadn't seen Graham Murdoch. He went back. He didn't stay, but he went back after a couple of years. Went back to Rhodesia. I don't know what he's doing with the farm or something. Yeah.
Pat had went on to have a great career in the British Army.
He was a brigadier in charge of Army Air Corps. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean flying attack helicopters.
in business. Yeah. And
what your career in the British Army, was that significant?
Yes, the awful thing was I was the only female never to have gone. In those days, it was Camberley, not Sandhurst, because now the girls go to Sandhurst. But when I was there, the female army officers were trained at Camberley, and when I got there. I'd never been to Camberley. I'm the only British Army female officer who's never been to Camberley. But unfortunately, I was posted to an all-female regiment. Can you imagine having been in the Rhodesian Army? And so there was it was a training regiment for this, and it was 3 months of. They didn't, as in Rhodesia, they didn't really know what to do with me, because this is all very new to them. And they said, "What would you like?" And I said, "I wanted to be the assistant adjutant of a gunner regiment in Germany." That was the best thing for a girl to do, I thought. And I got posted to a gunner regiment that was about to move to Germany, so it was great. It all worked very well. And also I was the only left. I went to. And I said to them, I want to go to Junior Division Staff College, because I didn't want to lose all. It's a really intense 3-month course. And I was the only, there were 4 females and 96 guys on that course. I was the only, one was just a nurse, never done anything else. And I felt really sorry for her, because it was very much, she was a bit lost, I think. But I didn't know. Nobody ever told me until Pat told me, and he actually put it on the video as well, that I didn't. He said I came top of the course. I'm sure I didn't come top of the course, but what I did come top of was we had to do something called op appreciation, and I was completely stumped, didn't know where to start, and then because I never actually done it in the Rhodesian Army, didn't actually know where to start. Then somebody just guided me for about 5 minutes, and I suddenly clicked. And I just worked through the night, producing apparently the best one of the lot of all. I don't know if that's true. Pat says it's true. Nobody ever told me, but I think that Pat obviously was always interested in my career in the British Army. So I think, and I was the only female with 700 men, which might sound fun, but I was a lieutenant. They gave me lieutenant, not captain. They gave me lieutenant, and so the subbies were all in their sort of 19, 20, and I was 30. So they were lovely to me, but And then I went back to nursing and went back to be assistant in intensive care unit. So two fantastic careers.
So you became an intelligence officer in the Selous Scouts.
Yeah, bit grander than so.
Does one need any special training to become an IO?
They sent me on the IO's course. There's an IO. I'm no good at places. Gwella, the one at Gwella. It was Gwella, and I went there went there for I don't know, a month, 6 weeks, I can't remember, and then went back. But to be honest, I was only there for 3 months. It wasn't that long, because everything still. I went there in December. In fact, New Year's Day I went there, and I was all finished in March, February, March. So it was only a short time. I don't really remember. I don't remember that much about it. I mean, not an awful lot.
Yeah, if I may ask, because my only exposure to intelligence officers was obviously in the RLI. We used to get a regular briefing, an int briefing on what's in the general area. In my time, it was also 75 up Hurricane type area at mainly Jock Darwin. Out of Jock Darwin was where I spent most of my time. But if I may ask, what's involved in being an intelligence officer? I mean, apart from the obvious. Yeah.
If I say I don't remember, it sounds terrible. You just get all the information coming back from and try and plot out where the terrorist groups are from the feedback you get from them for the ops room is probably the easiest thing to say. And then you plot on the maps and you try and work out the sort of positions they might be going, the directions they may be going. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And also towards the end, I remember the last month or so, it must have been when the assembly points were there, so we were spending more time with that than anything else. But a lot of it was just getting. It was the same in many ways in 4R. I mean, I wasn't IO in 4R, but and then from all the guys, and anyway, there was contacts or anything, and then I would plot it on the maps and then give briefings. So.
When you left Umtali, you froze and you carried on talking about Pat Armstrong. Where were you sent after Umtali?
I was a 4R and working with 4R Grand Leaf. And then they did the officer. I know. I went to military studies. I went to Army headquarters. I went to military studies, the training part where they train the officers.
Okay,
I
so
went there for.
in Umtali, you were under Garth Barrett, but then you worked with Pat Armstrong. So you
Garth
had a
Barrett to begin with. He went. No. I wasn't under Pat. In Grand Reef, Pat Armstrong wasn't my boss. It was Peter Brown, Colonel Peter Brown, who was a TA colonel for 4R. And he actually lived, had a farm by Grand Reef, and Grand Reef is a Fire Force base. So if anything, he was my boss there, if you like. Garth had gone, by the time I got to Grand Reef, Garth had gone to the SAS. The guy who took over didn't really get to know him properly. I didn't really have much to do with him because I was at Grand Reef with Peter Brown, who's a great guy. I mean, he was virtually full-time, really. Then I went, I think they asked me if I wanted to go to Salisbury, to be at military studies. That's where they do all the officer training for the male officer, that high level training. I wasn't there for long because then they had the officers course, and then I went to an officers course, and then I went to Army headquarters and Pat Armstrong. That's why I met Pat Armstrong again as my boss.
You weren't part of the sort of team that ran the RWS at all, really.
It wasn't really, if you like, running the RWS. Barbara Trow was the person in charge. She got captain. I think she got captain first. But Joyce O'Toole in the end was responsible for the RWS, but she was the GSO, she was ASO 3 admin or something at Army headquarters. She did a lot to do with the RWS because she was administering them actually. But we didn't have a boss of the RWS. We were allocated to where we were posted rather than, which is lovely, which the British Army now doing. It was lovely. So we were RWS, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Ilsa Atkins was like a training, like a drill instructor or something.
Who was? Who?
Ilsa Atkins.
Oh, Ilsa Stradham. She's married. She was Ilsa
Stradham then. Yeah.
She was Stradham. Oh, she was great. She and I went on a drill course. And she stood out by miles. And when I know what I did at Milles. I forgot all this stupid me. At Milles, I'm glad you can cut these out. At military studies, I ran training courses for the RWS. That's what I did. I took over and ran training courses for the RWS. So I had intakes of new ones every month, probably, and we did 2-week course every month. As part of that, I did the drill instructors course, and Ilsa Stradham was on that. Amazing person. She was a great drill instructor. But I did about, how many courses did I do? I probably ran about 6 or 7 courses, and then for the officers, I've forgotten about that. and at that stage we had the Air Force as well, and then the Air Force trained their own later on. But we had some Army, some Air Force at that one. Yeah, had about 24, something like that. I don't know who did the drill then for them, because it wasn't also obviously first of all. I can't remember who did it. The Scout reunion in Joburg, the 40th anniversary, flew out in 2013. And it was great because there was I don't know if you know Graham Wilson. Graham Wilson was 2IC SAS. Yes, Graham Wilson, Rich Passaportis, and Pat Armstrong were all there. And it was just, I hadn't seen any of the 3 of them for 30 years. Remembering that Pat had been my boss for so long, it was just fabulous to see them again. It was so nice. I won't go back again, but it was fantastic to see them.
Graham Wilson, of course, being the famous Phantom Major who won the Grand Cross of Valor.
Yes, I know. Yeah, he
Silver Cross and the Bronze Cross too.
Yeah. He actually got turned down by the British SAS.
Oh, really?
I don't think he passed. Well, he was quite. Graham's great. He was quite not exactly slim, and he smoked a lot. And I should think fitness. I mean, he was a fantastic soldier. He was brilliant. I mean, a tactician, everything. But he got turned down. Quite a few got turned down actually from the British Army. I don't know how many tried. I know one of the RWS officers got turned down, but she wasn't. I'm not surprised she was turned down. So they hadn't interviewed me. I mean, it was Rupert Smith who said, let her join. I think we weren't interviewed as such in the UK. We just literally flew from Rhodesia back home and to a job. So Pat Lawler's got lots of job offers, and I just went to the females and went from there. But he got lots of jobs. But I had a great time with the show. They're really good to me. But just so different.
Yeah.
It's very different. I say more serious in a different way, more serious. I mean, the subjects were fun, but it was just a different subject. It's difficult to imagine being so busy when there wasn't a war on. that was right. It was quite interesting thing to take, you know, but still.
Yeah. What made you decide to go to Rhodesia? How did you hear about it? What?
I didn't even know. I didn't. I knew Rhodesia was in Southern Africa. My mum, interesting. My mum had been in South Africa for a long time, and she loved it. But I just remember her talking about it. That was perhaps in the back of my mind. But I knew a family who lived out there, and their son happened to be over, and he was in the youth group or something with him, and I met him there, and it was just a way of getting my a free flight out, a year's salary, and a free flight back. So why wouldn't you? Because I wanted to be a sister, a ward sister at St Thomas's in London, where I trained. That was the great pinnacle of my career. It used to be there. And then when I got out there, and then I started meeting when I joined the army. Of course, what the lovely thing is when I was first in the army, doing some communications things up some mountains and stuff, things like that. Or they were flying to our guys in the bush, and I'd often go in the helicopters and go and go around. This fantastic. I mean, I was so lucky. And then I was at Chipinge. I don't know why I was at Chipinge. I'd been sent out to Chipinge with I don't quite sure why, and. There was Derry McIntyre, Hickman, actually, seeing all the troops, just doing a trip all around the country. Not troops, I think, seeing more senior people. And I was at Chipinge. I said, "Oh, can I go with you?" Sort of half joking, and they said yes. So I had this fantastic trip around the whole of Rhodesia, seeing quite important people, staying in some lovely places, just by saying, "Can I go?" And so I was very, very lucky. And I used to when I did go with the guys in the helicopters and other times, I used to sit out with my legs out of the helicopter. We have to learn to do helicopter transfers, so they got helicopters from Rhodesian or somewhere, and we used to have to go out and practice doing these transfers, not with patients on board. And I said to the guy, "Can I please put my feet out the helicopter?" And they obviously thought I was mad. And they had to strap me in and everything. I mean, I was never strapped in, you know, imagine I was never strapped in there, but they had to strap me in. But I was able to lean out and look down over the culture store, leaning out the helicopter. But they, so I loved it. I absolutely love it. I'm skimming in the elephants in the game, running beneath you just above the tree. It's fantastic. And so I was very, very lucky. But a lot of people, a lot of the other army girls said, "Well, how come you've done all this?" I said, "Well, because I asked." You know, all I did, they can say no, can't they? And in my whole life, if you don't ask, you don't get. And they very rarely said no, but you know, it was a fun. And then when I went to the bush, the guys had. I mean, I was going out with. I wonder who it was, but I was going out with a guy, and he was in the SAS, and he had been sent out. Disappeared, and he wasn't there, and I was doing this. I was doing the trip going around the country with Hickman and McIntyre, and we landed at this airstrip, fairly in the middle of nowhere. And this guy I was going out with walked was the guy who walked up to greet them, and I just looked at him. He looked at me. Hickman looked at me. Dave McIntyre looked at me. They all looked at me, thinking, "What the hell's going on here?" I think the guy had thought I had planned it, but I didn't have a clue, and it was really hilarious. Well, I don't think he was over chuffed. You know, as I said, lots of the girls said, "How come?" But I was glad we'd helped because, of course, helicopters were there. But I just used to ask, and they never minded. There was a space in the helicopter; they never minded. So you know, I did a lot of trips. I did a fiction trip over. I used to do what do you call them? Communication 3 times a day with the guys, with the 4 guys in the bush, and they were used to hear my voice, and apparently they quite liked to hear a female voice because you know over the radio. And I fixed when it was horrid because she got up and down the hill. It's the only time I ever felt airsick. And so I did the report with them, and they said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm right overhead of you." And so they waved at me. So that something was fun. So I'm laughing now. I just love. I remembering back now. It's fantastic. You're going to have problems. You're going to have problems editing this.
It's fun. So,
I must see it before you.
Yeah, of course. No, I'll let you the final cut before we publish and get your. Yeah, you have frozen a few times. So if I do cut bits out, it's because they were frozen.
So have you.
You did seem to meet a lot of interesting personalities and some of the big names of the Rhodesia. Did you ever meet PK van der Bijl?
I was just going to say I met him because he was a good friend of Dave McIntyre's, and I met him what a character. Yes, I did. Yeah, he was like an aristocratic English gentleman in the bush. He was so nice. Yes, I was. Yeah, obviously met Ian Smith a couple of times, and then I was ADC to his wife, to Janet Smith, on one of the female passing out parades. So I met them a couple of times, but not much. She was lovely. I don't remember. He was nice. I saw him in the UK. He came over to UK a few years ago to one of our reunions. But yeah, I'm trying to think who else I met. Oh, obviously Pete Walls, and then of course Pete Walls was Pat Lawes' father. Well, the sad thing was he couldn't wasn't allowed to independence, and he didn't dare go back in the country, so it wasn't his daughter's wedding. But I think people thought he might try and sneak in, but he didn't. He wasn't. I mean, I was there. I'm sure he wasn't there, but that was the same, because they were the two of them. She was his oldest child, and the two of them had a really good relationship.
It's funny. PK van der Baal used to be. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can now. You froze a moment. Yeah, I can now.
Okay. PK van der Baal was the MP at Hartley when my dad was the Anglican priest in Hartley.
Oh, yes.
And there was some municipal function or whatever, and my dad and mom and dad were invited, and PK van der Baal was there. And, PK, of course, stands for Pickaninny Kaya. It's slang, slang for a bathroom, a toilet. So, you would say, where's the PK? Pickaninny Kaya being a small outhouse. Yeah.
Yes,
and when my mom met him, she said, "Oh, I've always felt so sorry for you." She said, because my father's initials were WC.
Oh, no.
Well, I can tell you, PK was not amused. He was not amused.
He's a very interesting guy. I never felt I even touched the surface.
Yeah.
Knew him. I didn't. But he was a fascinating guy. I mean, I mean, he was 100 years too late to
Yeah.
Very much, yeah.
Long after the war, I became a member in Cape Town, a member of the City and Civil Service Club, and PK was also a member of the City and Civil Service Club. It was like the Kimberley Club or the Rand Club, and Cecil John Rhodes, and a real colonial club. And PK used to. I often used to have a beer with him there, and he would be wearing pinstripe trousers with braces, and putties. Spats, like something, Jeeves, or something. From like a previous century,
I was going to say at least 100 years before. I assume is he dead now? He's dead.
Yeah, long dead. Yeah. He was married to Princess von Liechtenstein.
Yeah.
You talk about the bush. He was used to refer to it as the bush. Well, Alison, thank you so much for your interesting chat. It's wonderful talking to you and reminiscing about those days. I really appreciate it. Thank you.